I now call to order this October 21st meeting of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission. I would like to start with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bowen,
Here.
Commissioner Khan,
Here.
Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Wilson, I think your mic is turned off.
That register?
There, now I can hear you.
Okay, I am here.
Okay. Commissioner Goodman,
I'm here.
Commissioner Houghton. Commissioner Houghton, your mic is turned off.
I am here.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Arcuri,
Here.
Chair Hopkins,
Here.
and we have a quorum.
Thank you. And are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Hopkins, there are no changes to the agenda.
Notices that on Thursday, October 16th, 2020 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration. We are now at the public comment period. Any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled before us this same day. The total amount of time will be 15 minutes and no individual speaker more than 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments, commentors?
Members of the public, if you will use the raise your hand icon, that lets me know that you want to make a public comment on anything that is not already listed on the agenda. Chair, it looks like that we have one raised hand. Joseph Moore. Are you ready for public comment, Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm ready for the public comment. Please go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore, if you would unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Commissioners and airport administrators, thank you for this opportunity. Good evening. I'm sure that we're going to delve into the topic of the ongoing complaints tonight, or at least I hope so. I'd just like to say that I'm a member of one of the local flying clubs, as well as a airport tenant on my own. I'd like to raise the point that these current issues, these complaints, they're taking up a lot of the administration's time, I believe. I believe that the airport administration would like to put these behind them. The thing about it is they're all come from one entity on the field. So Above All Aviation since 2018 has continued to lodge complaints against different folks on the airport. The initial complaint came in 2018. I think it could have been more easily dealt with had, instead of working on it behind the scenes, the airport attempted to reach out to those that were subject to the complaint. The second complaint came this year, and it continued this series of unfounded allegations. Now we find ourselves as airport users in a sticky situation where I believe we are unable to carry out normal operations that would normally not be an issue. Like, for instance, our flying club is trying to procure another tie down from the city. Or if not that, we would like to be able to amend our current tie down agreement, But I believe due to these ongoing complaints, the city administrators are unable, possibly because of the workload or because of the status. However, either way, we are unable to have requests that seem fairly normal or normal business to be approved. So I just, I was not very prepared to speak tonight, and I apologize for this, the content of my comment. However, I believe, if nothing else, where we should be given maybe a timeline to when we can hopefully see some sort of resolution. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Madam Secretary, are there any other commentors?
Members of the public, if you would like to make comment that is on any matter not already on the agenda, would you please raise your hand? Chair, there are no additional hands raised.
Okay, at this time I close the public comments and we will go on to the liaison reports. I saw a moment ago, our Santa Barbara City Council liaison member, Eric Friedman. Are you there, sir? And would you like to make a comment?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Chair Hopkins?
Yes.
I really don't have any comments at this point. I'm just here to observe, and I have just briefly met with Mr. Moore and a couple others and Mr. Thompson about the issues that are ongoing and just trying to come up to speed and on the different issues that are out there right now. So other than that, just here to learn more about what's going on tonight and the issues at the airport. Thank you. If there's any questions for me, I'm open for questions as well.
Hearing no questions, I will thank you very much and go to see if we have our liaison from the city of Goleta. No, apparently not. Then we'll go to item number 4, the director's report. Director Thompson.
Good evening, commissioners. As we began to see businesses reopen throughout the state due to improvements in cases of COVID throughout the state, at the airport, we remain cautious in managing our operation. Since the onset of this pandemic, the airport has met its obligation to remain open and operating 24/7. We have also met our regulatory requirements for the operation of the airport. Our administrative offices remain closed, and we are providing service by appointment only. This level of service has proven sufficient and has allowed us to provide a high level of service while protecting our team from unnecessary potential exposure. And I just want to share that with you to make you aware that, we're continuing business as usual at this point, as changes are being made throughout the businesses within the state. Air travel is improving across the nation. Last week, for the first time since March, the nation saw more than 1 million combined passengers in a single day go through checkpoints at airports across the nation. This is a positive trend we are seeing, which signals recovery, albeit slowly. Here in Santa Barbara, we are seeing activity consistent with this trend, with clear week-over-week marginal growth. This small growth demonstrates that our community is beginning to feel better about air travel, and they're doing so when they need to. Even with this growth, it is difficult to predict when we might see full recovery, given continued uncertainty across the nation. But we remain extremely optimistic about our future, given the level of interest, excitement, and confidence the airlines are expressing in our markets, even during these challenging times. We continue to manage our operation with careful consideration of our expenses and a focus on the limited revenues that we do have coming in. Later tonight, we will share with you our approach to our capital program, which we have reviewed very carefully and given due consideration to the challenging times that we face. And with that, management team, business development, any comments?
Yes, good evening, commissioners. So from the business development side, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. From the air service development side, Henry and I will be attending our first air service development event next week in Denver. It's the first one that has not been canceled for the year. So that's a bit of progress, and we'll be meeting with a list of roughly 10 different air carriers, including all of our current carriers, of course. So we're looking forward to that, preparing for that. And Kathy Janega Dykes from Visit Santa Barbara will be joining us in that endeavor as well. And air service development, we have a milestone in the month ahead, actually just about a month from today, with the introduction of new service to San Diego. And I'd like to encourage everyone who is listening to consider a trip to San Diego. It's a great destination. And right now, as with all air travel these days, bookings are taking place very much at the last minute. So bookings are looking still pretty light. And we're hoping that folks will take advantage of some really great fare promotions that Alaska is running for that service starting up. And we will be supporting that service with our marketing and public relations efforts. And we are partnered with Visit Santa Barbara as well in that endeavor. They will be working on some promotion inbound to Santa Barbara. And we are also collaborating with San Diego Airport as our partner airport for that. So on the property side, most significantly, we have been working on our first quarter financials, which are not quite complete yet. That'll be something that will be coming. There'll be more detail coming in the month of November. And this week, we have also conducted interviews for hopefully a replacement for our financial guru, Tom Bullers, who left us a little less than a year ago. So we're making some, continuing to make incremental progress on a number of fronts. So thank you.
Thanks, Deanna. Certification and operations. Aaron.
Good evening, commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Wanted to chat with you real quick about L3 Harris, Public View software. As you know, we've opened up this new layer of technology for public that wish to lodge a noise complaint related to aircraft activity in and around the airport. As a reminder for anyone that's listening, to access this product, you'll just simply go to flysba.com, go under About, and then from there you'll navigate to the Contact Us Aircraft Noise Advisory Program website. From there, you're able to enter noise complaints online. I do regret to report that late September, we had some technological improvements that were taken upon by L3 Harris. With that, there was a security-related browser message that came up on most browsers. I won't say all. I think Internet Explorer was one that was not affected, but I know Google Chrome, the browser that I use, did see this security vulnerability. I have received reassurance by L3 Harris that there is no vulnerability to any public member that lodged a complaint during this time. It was simply a technological improvement that didn't keep pace with the current browser's technology. That issue was resolved yesterday, and therefore any of our constituents wishing to lodge complaints from this point forward should not see that. And I'm very happy to report that, because we do see this as a very valuable type of technology that is able to give feedback much more expeditiously to any of our constituents that wish to speak to noise complaints within the Santa Barbara region. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Facilities, Jeff?
Good evening, Commissioners. The only thing I have tonight, I wanted to let everyone know that we had our disinfecting program going at the terminal full steam every night. We're disinfecting the entire public space of the terminal. And that's in addition to our sanitizing efforts, which are multiple times a day for high-touch surfaces. That's custodial staff working on that. So I want to thank them for doing that and making the terminal a safe place. We also have the breath barriers in place still, as I mentioned a couple meetings ago. So making the terminal safe for our passengers. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And with that, that concludes the director's report.
Thank you, Director Thompson. I have a question. Normally, we get a set of graphs that shows fuel and landings and passengers, et cetera, and I didn't see them on our agenda this time. Will we be able to get those at a later date for this period?
I will jump in here.
Go ahead.
Chair Hopkins, they are in your email.
Okay, thank you. I will look for them. And so that concludes the director's no, I'm sorry, does not conclude the director's report. Any other commissioners? I see Vice Chair Bowen has a question or a comment.
Yeah, I had unfortunately probably a lot of comments, but hopefully they'll be useful, and I hope the trip to Denver goes well. My main concern this evening is the parking area between the restaurant and the administration building, which now has a administration parking only sign up on that. And I was just curious, did we receive any feedback from the public to us regarding this change?
Commissioner Bowen, allow me to address that. First of all, I regret we have to spend time discussing this operational issue, which is being addressed by management and staff. But in the interest of being clear about what the facts are, let me take a few moments to do so.
Thank you.
Parking throughout the entire airport is restricted, controlled, and managed. For that matter, throughout the city, parking is controlled. In the case of the airport administration lot, I regret that we've waited so long to provide enforcement in this particular lot, but we're attempting to address enforcement. In this lot, there have always been clear intent for its use and restrictions, and they've always been in place but not actively enforced. What this has led to is after our use of the lot, there's been some abuses, there's been an increase in abandoned vehicles, stolen vehicles in the lot. When this occurs, it creates challenges for us to take action to remove the vehicles. So that's the problem that we've been trying to address. To correct this, we posted signs stating the restrictions that were that have always existed in the lot there. And we gave a grace period for everyone to get the word and begin to comply with the intended use of that lot. We did receive some complaints, primarily from Signature Aviation tenants who use the lot to access the nearby AOA gates for access. In response to those comments, we've looked closer at the use of the lot. We have explained to those who complained that Signature is responsible for providing parking for those individuals that have a parking need, and Signature is aware of that responsibility. And we've had some discussions with Signature about possibly obtaining some additional spaces under their leasehold agreement in the vicinity of that area there. So just for your information, it's being worked on. We're discussing it. We have heard comments from folks, and we're taking those into consideration. But I want to be clear, this lot has always had very specific intended uses, and we're trying to address problems that have crept up over time.
Thank you for your very good explanation. That answered many of my questions, but the real
Great.
reason I'm bringing this up is the possible perceptions that the timing of this closure causes, in that we're having issues with flying clubs and flight training and things like that. People could incorrectly get the perception that you are acting out against them. And by airing this now in public, I'm hoping that your explanations will help alleviate some of those concerns. Regarding the intent of the lot as a 30-plus year user of it, it's hard for you to say the intent. You've only been here a short period of time. So is there any parking recommendations for those of us who have used said gate for 30 years? Where should we go?
So I think you should contact Signature Aviation, who is your landlord, so to speak. And under Signature's leasehold agreement with the airport, they're required to provide you, their subtenant, with parking for your needs. In addition to that, you fall under Signature's liability policy should something happen to you or your vehicle while you're in their parking facility. So I would direct you to Signature until you hear something different from the airport. And Signature is well aware, and they're doing what they need to address the needs of their subtenants.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're getting this information out to the public. More questions on the same topic, I'm afraid. In the past, this lot has been widely used for special events at the airport. I'm not talking about Airport Day per se, but veterans events and things like that. I personally led a youth event where we used this lot. This would be weekend activity when airport administration is not using the parking lot. Will you have some form of policy to allow these users to access this lot?
We will. It all starts with posting it, and that's what the intent of the signage is. I want to be clear about what we're talking about here, though. The airport administration parking spaces in this particular area are very few. The bulk of that parking lot belongs to the restaurant lease. Now, the restaurant isn't under lease now, so it's not, the spaces aren't being utilized, but the entire lot is not designated as airport administration. Just want to be clear about that. So if there are special events, we will address the needs of special events. But again, we're trying to address other problems that have crept up over time. And in respect to, your long-term, use, of this facility, you're correct. I've only been here for 2 years, but I don't just rely upon my own knowledge. I rely upon what our leasehold agreements call for, and I rely upon what my staff's judgment is in this particular area. So again, there's been a lot of use of this particular space, and we just have not been enforcing it. Because we haven't been enforcing it, some things have gotten out of control, and we're trying to address it. There's nowhere else on the airport where we have uncontrolled parking.
Well, I'm glad you're airing your concerns and letting the public know there is a very wide perception that's very negative about this move. And it's best to try to communicate with the public and avoid political problems. Thank you for your answers.
You're welcome.
Are
I have
there
a
any-
question or a comment.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Go ahead,
Commissioner
Dennis.
Rogers.
So I'm delighted you guys are going to the Air Service Convention in Denver. I wish I was going with you, Deanna and Henry.
We'll work on that. Just want to
Just want to, I don't know, I don't know if you can comment on this, but I was wondering, you know, with the airport, you know, having a lot of, you know, flights and things like that, and, you know, remind you, I know you will, but be firm with Southwest. When I hear, Henry, we talked about this, that Southwest is beginning service to Montrose, Colorado, with a population of 43,000, and then the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs, 73,000, where just our South Coast is 250,000. Boy, if we can just push them a little harder, because it sure would be good to get Southwest flying in and out of here to a variety of destinations, at least in California to start. And the timing could be perfect with the hiatus from Contour, the flight that's no longer being deployed to Los Angeles from United, and Delta, who is at least temporarily down to Salt Lake City. Seems like now is the perfect time to push them a little harder. That we want you, we love you, and we have wide areas of our economy, not only leisure travel, but our tech community, our academic community. Now is the perfect time to begin service to Santa Barbara. I rest my case.
Thank you, Commissioner Hodden, and we appreciate your comments. Southwest Airlines is our friend, and they love Santa Barbara, and they're very much interested in Santa Barbara. We're on their list, and so I appreciate you highlighting all the potential business here in Santa Barbara for them, because if and when we are successful at securing them, then we're going to need the community to really step up and fill those seats. But I would just say hang in there. They're definitely on our list. We're courting them, and they are interested in Santa Barbara. And Deanna, I don't know if you would add anything more.
I would just add that Southwest is, of course, an airline that we will be meeting with in Denver, and we will have a special presentation prepared for them. So we are definitely gearing up for our next opportunity to talk to them.
Very good. Thank you.
This is Chair, this is Craig. I've got a question.
Go right ahead, Craig.
Deanna, when does the Alaska service to San Diego start?
It starts November 20th, and it's
Is it seasonal?
It's daily service year round.
Thank you.
Is that one round trip a day?
Commissioner Khan, yes, it is one departure a day, a departure and arrival. It's a turn a day.
Great. I might just add for Commissioner Houghton's edification that in the past, Southwest only went to places where they could do 8 frequencies a day. So, obviously they've modified their model, but they look for really huge populations. And, I'm very, very hopeful that Henry and Deanna will have good luck with them. But I think we're very lucky to have Alaska's San Diego service, which, how many years has it been since we had any service to San Diego? And it was pretty short-lived.
Commissioner Khan, yes, I believe it's back to the days of ExpressJet. So that's quite a number of years ago.
Great. So we're delighted. Please tell your friends to patronize it so we'll get to have maybe more frequencies.
Are there any other comments by commissioners or questions? Then I will open it up for public comments. Madam Secretary?
Members of the public, if you want to make comment on any of the items that were contained in the director's report, would you please use the raise hand icon on your screen? Chair, we have one raised hand, Joe Moore.
Okay, Mr. Moore, you can go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Alrighty, it should be quick. I hope that this is not an inappropriate time to bring this up, but given that Deanna gave her business development report, I'm wondering if it'd be appropriate to mention that 2 separate flight schools or hopeful flight schools, would-be flight schools have applied to the airport in I think within the last month. Both of them have been denied without a time frame of when the airport would be willing to accept applications. I just think it's an interesting move, given that there does seem to be quite a bit of vacant space around the airport, and we could definitely use more flight training competition. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Are there any other raised hands there, Mo?
Chair Hopkins, there are no other raised hands.
Thank you very much, and we will move on to the consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar. The first is to waive the reading and approve the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, September 23rd. And the other is that we receive the monthly property management report. Are there any questions or comments by commissioners? Mr. Houghton, do you have a comment?
I do not.
Oh, all right, I just saw your box go green. I thought okay, then the next item will be public comment. Madam Secretary, any raised hands on this?
Members of the public, if you want to make comment on the minutes or the property report, would you please use the raise hand icon? Chair Hopkins, there are no raised hands.
I will close the public comments at this time. I would like to have a motion and a second on this, please.
I move that we accept the consent calendar by waiving the reading of the minutes and the reading of the property management report.
I second the motion.
I think Karen Khan moved and Commissioner Wilson seconded. All in favor say, oh, do we need to have a roll call?
Yes.
Because we
Yes.
have to have a roll call. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Okay, this is to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Goodman,
Approved.
Commissioner Arcuri,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowen,
Yes.
Chair Hopkins.
Aye.
The motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. We will now go on to administrative reports. The big one for this meeting here, which is a capital improvement program for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. Director Thompson, is that you?
Yes, sir, it is. Good evening, Commissioners. Item 7 on tonight's agenda is a presentation on the airport's capital improvement program for the next 5 years. That's 2022 through 2026. This is not a budget exercise, but a planning outlook. The conversation on capital planning tonight is not so different from the discussion we shared with you last month on the airport's budget picture and the associated challenges. We have developed a CIP and presented to you in an environment with continued uncertainty and a slower than anticipated recovery in our business. This means that any planning we conduct today has to be approached in a very optimistic but conservative manner as well. Staff has made an attempt to project where our capital needs are and what funding sources might be available to address those needs. Realistically, the two are not in balance today. The airport is an aging facility with much of its infrastructure being more than 80 years old, and our newest facilities the airline passenger terminal, is turning 10 years old this year, where systems and equipment is aging or coming to the end of useful life, and improvements or replacements are needed. We have some significant challenges to overcome, but we don't have all the answers tonight. We have done a level of planning that is appropriate for where we are today, but adjustments to this plan will be required in real time as we see improvement in our business and where funding sources are identified. On October the 15th, staff presented the airport's capital improvement program to the Airport Commission Budget Subcommittee, in which 5 members attended part or all of that meeting. Based upon that review and comments received, we have finalized our presentation today. And before we begin our CIP presentation, I'd like to direct your attention to the commission memo you received in advance of this meeting that includes 2 important items. The first is the CIP project summary sheet, and that lists all of the projects, estimated cost, budget year, and funding sources. That's kind of our source document. And then there's also included in that packet the draft airport capital improvement program project detail sheet. And that's a summary sheet for each of the individual projects that gives you a good overview of the scope, time, and budget estimated for that project. So our presentation tonight is based upon these documents, which we did review in detail at the budget subcommittee. With that, we'll go into the presentation. So this is again the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2022 through 2026. Next slide, please. Purpose tonight is to review the airport department's draft capital improvement program for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. We're going to review some unfunded airport capital needs. And then we're going to recommend the draft CIP before forwarded to the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. So airport capital planning both has a local, state, and capital requirement. So at the local level, next slide. Getting ahead of myself here. So first of all, the FAA requires that airports come up with the CIP plan every 5 years. And that's a requirement to receive the grant funding that we receive. At the state level, Caltrans also has a requirement, and they're looking for a 10-year outlook in their plan. And then at the city level, the charter requires that we have a 5-year capital plan. Next slide, please. Okay, airport capital planning is defined as capital is defined as any project that's valued at $25,000 or more, or a project that has a life expectancy of 5 years or more. The airport capital program looks at airport improvement program funded projects, matching portions for the airport on those projects, airport funded capital projects, which are kind of tentative in the planning process at this point, and then airport unfunded capital projects, which are projects that we see out there, but we don't necessarily have a schedule or funding source that's been identified for those projects at this particular point. Next slide, please. And next slide. So again, the city charter requires a 5-year capital program. It's a clear general summary We have a list of capital improvements that are being proposed or undertaken during the next 5 years. We provide cost estimates, and then the estimated annual cost of operating and maintaining facilities. So all of those projects are included in our CIP program. Next slide. Again, we update our CIP every 2 years as part of our 2-year budget planning document. Typically, the first 2 years are considered budget-ready projects, but not so much this year due to the uncertainty that we have in our business. So we're planning, and as we get into the budget process, we're going to take yet another look at what we've planned and whether or not it's realistic once we get to the budget planning process. The outer years are used for identifying needs that are not constrained by funding availability. To some degree, that's still going to be challenging for us. We do have some FAA-funded AIP projects in our outer years that we're fairly comfortable about the funding source, but for our airport-funded projects, those outer year projects are not nearly as clear as we look at it today. And then on your summary sheet, the last column is considered unscheduled. So we have a number of future projects out there that are unscheduled that we're not able to really forecast at this particular point. Next slide, please. So we're well into the CIP process at this point. We started back in September, actually, even before September. And then in October, we're meeting with the Airport Commission today. We've met with the budget subcommittee, and then all of our data entry goes into the Public Works CIP system by October the 31st. Then moving forward in November, we'll be meeting with the city planner and engineering staff. We'll have some final edits. And then next slide. And in December, the city's draft CIP, which includes the airport, is prepared by Public Works. In January, the Planning Commission reviews the full city CIP. February, it's submitted to the city administrator. And then March, it goes on to city council for approval. And then from there into the budget process. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, we, in your packet, we included a CIP summary sheet. It looks a little bit different from the one on this slide, but it includes a list of all of our projects. It shows the funding sources. It shows the years in which we're funding those projects. And to the best of our ability, we've come up with some cost estimates for each of those individual projects. Next slide. You'll also see in your packet this project summary sheet. Looks very similar to this one. Provides a description of the individual projects, plans related to it, and then a breakout of the funding and the various funding sources as well. Next slide. Capital projects. Okay, next slide, please. So the airport department CIP that we're presenting to you for 2022 through 2026 includes about 36 projects. They're valued at about $54 million. Of that 54 million, about 21 million are projects that are AIP eligible grant projects. Some of that funding or bulk of that funding has already been committed in the program by the FAA. In the AIP program, Santa Barbara Airport receives about 3 to 3.5 million a year in AIP funding from the FAA. We're going to be fortunate in this CIP period to receive quite a bit more than that because there's some discretionary funding, particularly related to the taxiway hotel project that's going to benefit us greatly as well. In addition to the 21 million in AIP grants, we have about 2.4 million in matching funds that the airport has to come up with. That's in our program. And then we have some priority projects valued at about 30.5 million that are going to be airport funded. We haven't necessarily identified the funding source for this, but again, as I mentioned earlier, as we get closer to the budget planning process, we're going to take a look at what we're able to budget out of that 30.5 million in projected projects. And then we also have another group of projects that are future needs that we have, or future capital needs that we have at the airport, and it's valued at about 85 million, but we have no funding and no schedule assigned to it necessarily. So these are things that are fairly important to us, and as funding becomes available or other projects aren't realized, we're able to move these projects forward. Next slide, please. So FAA grant eligible projects, we have 6 projects where funding is pretty much assured within this CIP period. We've already had discussions with the FAA, and so we'll go through those very shortly with you. Next slide. And Aaron, if you don't mind taking over.
Happily. Good evening again, commissioners. This is more of an all-inclusive list of projects that the airport staff has built with the expectation that additional discretionary and or supplemental funding similar to what we were able to gain from the FAA for part of the Northeast Apron project in, I believe it was about 2 years ago, give or take. So what we've done here is we've packaged together a large number of projects that we believe will be highly eligible for that supplemental funding as designated by Congress, as we all expect to come over the next year or so. And I just want to touch briefly on each of these. As you might imagine, each of these projects is fairly large in scale, and there's a lot of planning work needed, but for the intent of our presentation, I will just kind of give a quick overview of each. So the first one I want to touch on is our taxiway designation update. As part of the overall improvement of airport infrastructure across the nation, the FAA is looking for similarities in airports to consist, whether it be West Coast, Midwest, East Coast, and that there's some predictability to the way that taxiways are laid out. As such, Engineering Brief 89 was released, it's probably been 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't have the exact time frame on that, but as part of our acceptance of FAA discretionary funding and the entitlement funding for our taxiway hotel extension, it was mandated upon us that we complete a full airfield taxiway designation update. This has been a tremendous project that's involved many FAA stakeholders. There's very strict planning guidance that goes into place in the FAA advisory circulars and Engineering Brief 89, as I alluded to, that will rename the taxiways on airport. And it's more of a north to south, east to west type designation plan based upon your primary instrument runway. So that's something that we've embarked upon. We've enlisted support of air traffic control, FAA planning, who really holds the cards with regard to what those taxiway designations are, because it is listed within the advisory circulars that we're all required to follow. So as that project continues to move forward, we'll start to engage stakeholders, make sure that they are aware of any potential changes. And should charting supplements and or designations not coincide at the same time, appropriate notams will be issued to make sure all of our aircrew and airmen are aware of the appropriate updates. Moving forward, the second project, the sign and marking plan update, also coincides with the designation update, in that all of our taxiways will have to be renamed on that sign and marking plan. And not stated here, but kind of incidental to that will be our airport layout plan upgrade as well, which will also show those upgrades. We also want to go out and do a full airfield signage and marking analysis to ensure that we are up to current FAA standards. As we all come in with fresh eyes and look at new situations, we want to make sure that we're following the letter of the law to the greatest extent possible. So we'll bring in a consultant on board. We'll get out in the airfield. We will be conducting surveys of existing airfield marking and just update all of those existing taxiway designations into our formally approved sign and marking plan, which is part of our airport certification manual. Additional to that would be the obvious replacement of airfield signage to include those updated designations. But I also share with you, and I'm sure Jeff could speak much more eloquently to the existing status of the airfield lighting, but we have many incandescent lighting fixtures on the airfield that are not energy efficient. We also have old LED technology that is no longer supported. It's outdated. So that's why we've titled this Airfield Safety and Efficiency Projects. I want to focus on not only is this a safety improvement for the airfield, but as we look at COVID, the impacts that it has on our financial situation, we need to start looking for more efficient uses of our airfield. Another one of those projects would be the Airfield Lighting Control System, ALCMS. That is the actual system that controls airfield lighting, not only from our airfield electrical vault, but from the tower cab, so that way they can adjust the lighting intensity based upon current weather condition. Another project very similarly to the ALCMS upgrade would be our pilot controlled lighting upgrade. As you know, right now, runway 15 right is the only surface on the airfield today that is controlled by pilot controlled lighting. The rest of our surface burns continuously, 24/7, outdated LED incandescent fixtures. And as part of that, the idea is that we bring all of that into a pilot controlled lighting status. And what that means for the novice user of the airport is basically 3, 5, or 7 clicks for low, medium, high intensity, as requested by the pilot on approach or on departure. These systems generally operate for 15 minutes and then will shut off, preserving electricity, which is the greater goal of the city of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City Council. And then finally, all of these projects really hinge on the successful addition of a more substantive infrastructure project. With that, we have Taxiway Mike. That is one of our lowest pavement condition index rating surfaces on the airport. Currently, Taxiway Mike has a pavement condition index of in the 60 to 70 range, which is the lowest on the airfield aside from the existing project that's occurring at the Northeast Apron and the Taxi Lane Delta area that's occurring today. So that will be one of the next most pieces of critical infrastructure that we touch upon, which we believe will make us much more eligible for some of these additional projects. So again, with all of this, we're trying to capitalize on the FAA, Congress, and their need to infuse dollars into the local economy to keep construction going and keep the economy humming. So this is our opportunity to kind of give back to the community, give back to our local workers, the economy, and get the necessary safety and efficiency projects that we need for the airport moving along. And that's it. Next slide, please.
And the airport master plan update is the next project. The existing master plan was initiated in about 2012, finalized in 2017. Some elements of the master plan have been executed, but this project will update that master plan document. We're estimating about $300,000, and it is AIP fund eligible, and takes quite a bit of time to get that project completed. So we're projecting that for FY22. Next slide, please. Northeast hangar improvements on the pavement. Phase 3 of the project is actually underway now. This includes the reconstruction of Taxi Lane Delta. We were fortunate enough to be able to secure an additional $830,000 in AIP funding to complete this project this year. So that's the reason it's well underway, but it needs to be included in our capital project for us to be fully refunded for that investment. Next slide. RPZ acquisition for land that's in the runway 25 approach area. This project is to study and negotiate property purchase. We're estimating about $4 million. It's not funded, it's not scheduled. This is something that we are projecting to be able to use AIP funding for. It's a legitimate use of funds, but this has not been presented to or approved by the FAA as of yet. Next slide. And then there's Taxiway Hotel Extension, which is a multi-year project that we're well into the environmental component of the project this year. And then we're going to proceed to design and then construction. AIP funding will be used for this project. We're actually going to be taking a couple years of our AIP entitlement funds to construct this project. And then the FAA is going to throw in a significant amount of discretionary funding to make this happen. So in total, close to $15 million for this taxiway extension. So it's a significant project for us to undertake. And that's the reason why it's spread over a number of years. Next project. Next slide. The next group of projects are airport-funded capital projects. Next slide. First on the list is 495 Fairview Avenue, which is the big hangar that we acquired a couple years ago. When this hangar was returned to the airport, we didn't realize at the time just how much neglect there was in the hangar. It is generating significant revenues for us now, but in order to maintain that revenue stream, we're going to have to invest to make some significant repairs over there. We're focused on the roof repair right now. That's a significant effort and a priority so that we can prevent further leaks from entering into the building when it rains and doing further damage, to other components in the building. So a number of repairs that we have identified. And so for this particular project, we will anticipate budgeting about $100,000 of airport funds in each of the next 5 years to make needed repairs and improvements on the facility. Next slide. And Deanna.
Alrighty, so this is a building on the north side of Hollister on Patello Road. So it is located behind Direct Relief. It is a World War II vintage building, so it's about 70 years old. It has been occupied, I believe, since the late 60s by a longtime government subcontractor tenant. And in conjunction with the last lease renewal, which was for a 7-year agreement, they required a certain number of upgrades to the building, essentially to bring it into compliance and to really upgrade some very antiquated systems. So this is part of a commitment we made in conjunction with that lease renewal. So some work has been done, but it will be continuing over the next few years as that lease continues.
And next slide. Airline Laboratory Pretreatment Facility. This project replaces or enhances, I should say, the lab dump pretreatment capabilities that we have here at the airport. This is a project that's required in order for us to be able to connect our waste to Goleta Sanitary System, which is just across the street. It is an environmental requirement because the blue liquid that's included in the waste that we have here at the airport has a negative effect on the healthy bacteria that the sanitary system across the street utilizes for waste. So in order for us to be able to connect and have our pre-treated waste flow into the system, we're going to have to invest about $600,000 into this project. This is a priority project for us coming up, and the airlines are in support of it as well. Next slide. The next project is airline terminal projects. As I mentioned earlier, the airline terminal turns 10 years old this coming year, and with that, we're starting to see some wear and tear on the building. We're starting to see a lot of the systems and equipment and elements within the building began to show wear and tear and come to the end of life. Unfortunately, because the facility opened up as a new facility, everything's aging at the same rate, and so this is a potential significant expense we're going to have all at one time to make needed repairs, and we didn't have the foresight to create a terminal fund to begin to accumulate funds for some of these major projects that are coming up. So that's essentially what this is doing. In each of the 5 years of our capital program, we're going to budget $100,000 to begin to address elements such as stucco on the building, the cement floors, carpeting, lighting repairs, equipment. And most of these projects are high ticket items. And so it would prove very challenging for us to address many of them with our operating budget in any given year. So we're a little bit behind the curveball, but we need to start addressing the need of the terminal to ensure it remains a first-rate facility. Next slide, please. And Jeff, if you don't mind.
Sure. AOA maintenance, $150,000 a year. This money is typically used to maintain both movement and non-movement area pavement that's not eligible for AIP. So things like crack seal, slurry seal, and things like that. Next slide.
And I would just add to that pavement, again, we're an aging facility. A lot of our pavement is 60, 70, 80 years old. And so, you know, we're investing $150,000 in each of the next 5 years. But that's not necessarily going to address all of our needs. This will allow us to address some critical repairs that need to be addressed. Next slide. And Aaron.
So speaking of aging infrastructure at the terminal, this is the airport terminal intercom replacement system. As we conducted our airport security upgrade project, we found there were a few airport terminal intercoms that were no longer operating. We sought to seek out some of these devices that you see here on the right side of the presentation. Unfortunately, they are no longer supported by the manufacturer. So therefore, we will need to be seeking a terminal-wide intercom replacement. And to specify, these terminal intercoms are not the standard terminal intercoms that you would think of when you're talking about boarding announcements, things of that nature. This is going to be more particular to airport operations, behind the scenes type needs when it comes to deliveries at the Sally Port, which is our loading dock at the terminal facility. This is where a FedEx driver or the Berryman in town would come in to deliver products for our concessionaires, such as restaurants, or if we have newspaper deliveries, things of that nature. We also have them strategically located elsewhere around the terminal complex for security related needs. But this is a project that's going to need to take place in the next couple of years in order to make sure that we can continue our continuity of operations on that front.
Next slide. And Jeff.
Right, so this is a airport utility infrastructure money. We use this for large maintenance projects and repairs, mainly the water and wastewater systems on the airport. We do a periodic inspection of the wastewater system, and those repairs are prioritized, and we use this money to make those repairs. Next slide.
Next slide. Next project is the General Western Aero hangars, relocation or restoration. We're not quite sure what the objective will be of the project, but the idea is to try to salvage these original facilities that are deteriorating on the airport. This project provides funds for consultants and a planning effort to determine how we move forward. We are proposing to invest $500,000 for this planning and maybe some designing in this effort. And then we're going to use that data that we collect to be able to hopefully do some private fundraising. We're estimating it's going to take about $4 million at this point to relocate and restore these hangars. That's not $4 million from the airport's budget. So we have engaged some private citizens who have interests in helping us salvage these hangars, and so we're going to work towards that effort. Now, we're budgeting $500,000, but that $500,000 is going to have to be prioritized amongst all of our other needs. So it's entirely possible that we may not be able to fund this full amount, but this is what we're estimating the need is at this point. Next slide, please. Goleta Slough Mouth Management. This is a project that we plan to enter into in partnership with County Flood Control to address flood vulnerabilities at the mouth, piping, pumping, sand grading and equipment. Right now, we're estimating about $1 million. This has been in our capital plan, but it's currently unfunded and unscheduled. But it is a need that we're going to need to address. Next slide. And Jeff?
So funds for Leslie Building maintenance. As you know, we have 56 buildings, many of them aging World War II structures. So this money is for large scale repairs like roofs, HVAC, large scale painting projects and things like that on our buildings. Next slide.
Southfield redevelopment project. This is a project that's been on our capital list. It's underway in respect to the environmental requirements, and we're doing some design effort with within our current capital budget. We did remove about $2 million from our capital program as part of the current year's budget reductions. But this brings us back into our capital program. It's a need that we will have to address in the near term. It adds additional commercial aircraft parking. It expands and improves the rental car ready return lot, adds some fencing, lighting, and there are some security components to this project as well. So it's definitely something we're gonna be funding, and it is underway. Next slide. And Jeff.
Streets resurfacing program, taking care of airport streets and parking lots. So this is crack seal, slurry seal, or overlay, depending on the needs of the street. $150,000 a year. We have a lot of need.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that, you know, this $150,000 each year is what we're going to try to invest just to keep up with all of the pavement needs on airport roads and parking lots. So we have a lot of asphalt out there, and so this may not be the full need that we have, but we have to invest something, and so we are projecting $150,000 in each of the next 5-year capital programs. Next slide. The next group of projects are what we consider to be future needs, priority projects, but they're not currently funded, and they're primarily not funded because we haven't identified exactly where these airport funds will come from. Next slide. And first up is 61 Hollister Avenue. This would be phase 2 of that development across the street from the administrative offices. Phase 1 was an extremely successful project. We were able to fortunately pay off the loan that we had on the phase 1 project with the city this past year. And so the next step would be to proceed with phase 2, and we're estimating about $6.8 million to construct that. I believe a lot of the design components already done, so we're kind of ahead of the game there. We've not identified the trigger yet to pull that's going to move this project forward. So it's on our capital list, but we've not funded it, and we don't have it on our schedule. Next project. And Deanna.
Yes. Alrighty, this 6150 Botella Road, as you might guess, is a building adjacent to the one we discussed previously. Same vintage of building. This building has, I would say, suffered from deferred maintenance for many years. You can see on the slides here that the facade, of course, has a lot of problems, and that's really just the start of it. So while this is unfunded, this is a leased property. It has been leased for quite a long time by two small businesses and is an income generating property. So at some point, we need to make a reinvestment in this building in order to keep it generating revenue for the airport. So thanks. Next slide. I can speak also to this slide. This is a parcel that is currently occupied on the north side of Hollister in that industrial area. It's being currently used as an open yard site. However, it does have some potential to be developed with a commercial industrial use of some sort. So it's simply a good piece of property with easy access and has a greater potential than what we are utilizing it for today. Next slide.
The aircraft wash rack. We have an existing wash rack that will need to be relocated as part of the FBO redevelopment project. We're estimating about $500,000 for that project. It's not funded and it's not scheduled at the moment. As we get closer into the FBO redevelopment work, then we'll get more specific about where this project is going to fit in. But for right now, it's on our list of capital project needs that we have. Next slide. Airline equipment maintenance facility. This project really helps us begin to address airline equipment that's scattered all over the ramp facility. This is going to relocate a lot of that equipment, some of it working, some of it not, put it under a canopy and having a capability to wash that equipment as well. About $40,000 is what we're projecting, and we've not moved it forward to fund it in our capital program yet, but it is on the list of needs. Next slide. Airline terminal expansion on the north side of the terminal. Within our master plan, we are expecting to expand the terminal about 5,000 square feet on the north side, adding a new passenger bridge. It's about $6.8 million. It's not currently funded and not scheduled. And we're going to be looking for the right trigger that's going to be needed for us to begin looking at the schedule and funding for this project. And that's that trigger is going to be passenger enplanements and the air carrier needs at the airport. We'll also be prioritizing whether or not to do the north side or the south side of the expansion of the terminal first. So all of that to be determined. Next slide. On the south side, the master plan calls for expanding the terminal about 11,200 square feet, adding a new passenger boarding bridge. The cost on that side is about $14 million. Same situation on the south side. It's unfunded, it's not scheduled, but we're gonna be looking for that trigger, which is enplanements and airline needs before we proceed with it. And I'll also add, to these two projects here, the Southfield development project is a project that's going to buy us a little bit of time before we have to execute either the expansion of the terminal to the north or to the south. So that's another part of the justification for the Southfield development project that we shared earlier. Next slide. Airport administration relocation. We know sometime within the next 3 to 5 years, we will need to relocate from our existing administrative offices to make room for the FBO redevelopment. So as we roll out that FBO development project and we have a need for this space, that'll be the trigger for us to relocate. Right now, our first option that we're looking at is on the upper floor of the big hangar at 495. We're estimating about $1.7 million to build out and relocate, but it's not currently funded, but will be moved forward as we get to it. Next slide. And the airport industrial area specific plan update. We have a plan from 1998, and it's designed to create a modern vision of the airport. That plan needs to be updated, and we estimate about $450,000 to do that. Again, not scheduled and not funded until we have a better sense of where the source of funds will be for that. Next slide. Hollister Avenue drainage improvements. This is flood abatement as well as wetland restoration. About $1.5 million is needed for this project. There's a potential that we might have a portion of this or possibly all of it covered through a grant, possibly the Taxiway Hotel project. We might be able to include it in there. But we still have to take a look at the project scope and grant eligibility on this one. But it's a fairly high priority because it addresses some flooding issues that we do have and we need to address. Next project. Maintenance yard fuel tank. This is a project to replace the airport's maintenance fuel tank, underground fuel tank system. We're estimating about $400,000. It is a city requirement. We need to go to above ground tanks that are protected from potential leaks. But we currently don't have the funding source for this. And so it's not scheduled within the program yet. Next slide. New long-term lot number 2. This creates a new parking lot south of the airline terminal for passenger long-term parking. This project I view more as a placeholder. It will probably be something we'll need to execute during an interim period while we're constructing a new garage facility that's programmed in the master plan as well. and it's unfunded at about $1.3 million currently. Next project, which is a parking garage, and this is the long-term master plan project. Additional capacity could be needed sooner than anticipated. Prior to March of this year, we were on a fast track to examining the design and construction of this garage, because we were at capacity with our parking, both in our existing short-term lot, our existing long-term lot, and our overflow facility on Hollister. There were periods when we ran out of parking completely, and so things have changed since March. But I do anticipate that we're going to need to turn our attention to the planning, design, and construction of this project. Within this CIP window, we'll probably need to do some level of work. It's a big ticket item, about $46 million, but that would be supported by parking revenues, rental car revenues, and a CFC fee on car rentals as well. So not pulling the trigger on this one yet. It's not funded, but it is something we're going to need to move forward in the near future. Next project. And Aaron?
Absolutely. So as Henry mentioned, there are a lot of unfunded projects that we're looking for funding on, and we are engaging the ADO on the next set of existing infrastructure projects that we need to take a look at. One of those being runway 15 left, anticipating about $3.4 million. So we're in discussions with them right now, determining eligibility, which also includes correctly on this slide, Taxiway Delta, which is part of the ongoing project. Although I will say the holding apron at Taxiway Delta, at the south end of the taxi lane, will still need to be rehabbed. But also Taxiway Juliet, right there where it approaches the approach end of runway 25. So more discussion on that, and in additional slides to come, I'll talk more about additional airfield pavement projects.
And next slide. Jeff, you want to cover that?
Sure. Our wastewater collection system west of the airport T hangars at Cass and Firestone is still 70-year-old infrastructure, leading to a lift station and a force main that goes to the slough to Goleta Sanitary District. So this project changes the flow of the wastewater, connects all that area, and it takes it east down Firestone to connect to the main Goleta Sanitary District main near Hollister and Fairview. So that's the project, is to get rid of that force main, get rid of that lift station, and to renew the wastewater collection system in that area.
Next slide. And Aaron?
All right, as alluded to, these are some of our next taxiway projects as determined by our airport engineering team. If I didn't mention it earlier, they're out on a monthly basis conducting pavement inspections that are entered into our micropaver software. And again, that gives us our pavement condition index number, which represents the prioritization of airfield paving projects. Alpha Foxtrot Papa being the next up on that list. Next slide, please. And then moving on from there, this just continues to list out the next set of projects. I don't need to run through each and every taxiway designation here. Again, as we know, they may be changing before we get to that project. So just again, representative here in blue as to what we'll be looking at in the following projects to come.
Next slide.
And then on to the north side of the airfield, about another $2.4 million. Again, all of this is subject to change. We know that there's the FBO development project that's coming on. While this is AIP eligible, you know, the negotiations with the FBO operators that may successfully bid on this project could change more particularly some of the infrastructure on the northeast quadrant of the airfield. So that's why this is not funded to date. Once those plans are finalized, we'll understand a little bit more what the north side of the airfield will look like. But again, we need to show the unfunded needs at this point. Next slide. And again, the final taxiway projects that we have listed in our capital improvement program is taxiway Mike and Bravo. You did hear me speak to taxiway Mike earlier. Again, that pavement condition index is in the 60 to 70. This just shows some of the severe weathering, longitudinal cracking, and all of that leads to continued degradation of the pavement, more particularly as heavier aircraft are taxiing off the runway. And as you know, we've seen an uptick in the Airbus and Boeing style aircraft over the last few years. So all of that plays into the additional degradation of the pavement, and therefore our prioritization, of these projects. So with that, that wraps up my pavement discussion today. Thank you.
And that it concludes the capital projects that we're bringing forward. There's approximately 36 projects, and we have a lot of capital needs here at the airport. We have aging infrastructure that has been deferred for a number of years. We've been very careful and mindful about which projects we've chosen to bring forward in these near years in this capital program. So as we shared our projects with you, you heard us say, quite a few times, we've not funded it and we've not scheduled it. And that was by design during our planning process. As our business begins to recover, as revenues present themselves or funding sources are identified, we're going to then reprioritize and move some of those projects that we put into those outer years. We'll move them forward. Again, this was a planning exercise. It's not a budgeting exercise. So we're simply identifying what our capital needs are and what our estimates and timelines are for these projects. With that, that concludes our CIP presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
So commissioners, do any of you have questions or comments? Raise your hand, except for Craig, who can just shout out. 5 out of the 7 of us have seen this before and did ask a lot of questions in the subcommittee. I was glad to see that many of the items where we asked questions were then covered in this presentation. So there's certainly no need to ask those questions again. Going once, twice?
Commissioner, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Houghton, go ahead.
Thank you. The airline lavatory pre-treatment facility. I'm amazed that we cannot ship this effluent waste to the Goleta Sanitary District, which is what, a quarter-mile away, and instead we truck it to Santa Maria. Will the upgrade allow us to ship it to Goleta?
Yes, that is the intent of that project. In fact, up until about a year ago, it was flowing directly into Goleta Sanitary's system. But about a year ago, they notified us that our waste material, which was mixed with this blue material that the airlines use, was having a negative effect on their healthy bacteria that they use in their plant. And so we had to cease sending it to them directly, and we're working on a solution that's going to pre-treat it and then force it over to Goleta San.
Great.
So,
and I have to say, this is a Herculean effort. Great job, staff.
Thank you,
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Then we will open it for public comment. Anyone who has, would like to make a public comment, go ahead and raise your hand. And Maureen, what do we have?
We have a raised hand by Joseph Moore.
Mr. Moore, you may go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Well, getting some practice at this tonight. The first item that I'm hoping that you guys might humor me with an answer to this question. There's been a lot of talk among other airport users about whether or not it's possible to rehabilitate the boneyard and reclaim that ramp space. And so I wonder if that's a possibility, or if that would be looked at during the restoration of the boneyard hangars. I think that's interesting. And then the second thing is just a comment about the upgrades to the wash rack. It looked like in that picture you used, there was an airplane, Chancellor 521 Alpha Tango, which is just kind of cool. It's the first, that's the first multi-engine airplane I ever flew with Commissioner Curry. So I just thought that was kind of neat. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Maureen, do we have anybody else?
Chair Hopkins, there are no other hands raised.
Okay, and one last chance for airport commissioners to comment or question. We'll close the public comments, and the only item I have left here before adjournment is, are there any items that a commissioner would like to add or suggest for next month's agenda? Hearing none, I will note that the next Airport Commission meeting is scheduled for November 18th at 6 p.m., presumably using this same format. Thank you all for attending. Hope to see you next month. Goodbye.
Good night.